Rain slicked the transpastile window of the bar in New Tokyo, distorting the neon advertisements that bled violet and crimson into the gutter water below. It was the kind of rain that smelled like ozone and recycled engine coolant, a permanent feature of the megacity since the atmospheric scrubbers took a hit during the First War. Major Elias Ward stared at the condensation, nursing a glass of amber liquid that claimed to be whiskey but tasted mostly of iodine and regret. He was tired. It was a bone-deep, marrow-level exhaustion that had nothing to do with lack of sleep and everything to do with being 38 years old in a century that treated human life like ammunition. His datapad buzzed against the scuffed surface of the table. The holographic emitter flared to life, projecting the insignia of the United Earth Directorate. It was a golden eagle clutching a globe, though Elias always thought it looked more like the bird was trying to crush the planet than protect it. Priority 1 transfer orders. Elias tapped the screen with a calloused finger. The text scrolled by, laden with the usual bureaucratic gibberish about duty, honor, and urgent reassignment. He skipped to the bottom, looking for the operational code name, Project Jester. Elias snorted, the sound loud enough to make the bartender, a drone with a dented chrome chassis, look up from wiping a glass. Jester. They were naming high-priority weapons projects after clowns now. It fit. The whole directorate had been a circus since the armistice. He tapped the communication link on his collar. "Connect me to Colonel Vance," he said, his voice raspy from the smoke that hung low in the bar. A moment later, a gruff voice filled his earpiece. "Ward, I assume you got the packet." "I did," Elias said, taking a sip of the synthetic whiskey. "Jester, really? Is the backup plan Project Mime? Do we box the enemy into an invisible cube until they surrender?" The colonel did not laugh. "Cut the chatter. Major, you are being pulled from the front lines. A shuttle is waiting for you at Sector 4. You are going up the stalk. Up the stalk meant the orbital elevator, which meant high clearance, which meant black ops." Elias felt a headache blooming behind his eyes. "Sir, with all due respect, my platoon is rotating back to the DMZ in 3 days. I am not an experimental test pilot. I break things. I do not test them. You are not the pilot. Ward, you are the handler. And you were requested specifically by who? Classified. Get to the shuttle. That is an order." The line went dead. Elias stared at the datapad for a long moment before swiping the message away. He finished his drink in one swallow, grimacing at the burn. He tossed a credit chip onto the table and stood up, grabbing his duster. "Jester," he muttered to the empty room. It sounded like a joke. He had a sinking feeling that the punchline was going to be him. The orbital facility was officially non-existent. It sat in a geosynchronous orbit that kept it hidden behind the bulk of the moon, a sleek, silver needle floating in the void. Inside, the air was scrubbed so clean it tasted metallic, and the gravity was set to a precise 1.0, lacking the subtle fluctuations of Earth that the body learned to compensate for. Elias walked down a corridor that seemed to stretch on for miles, his footsteps echoing on the white deck plating. He was flanked by 2 military police officers who wore full faceplates and carried pulse rifles that looked brand new. They had not said a word since he boarded the station. They stopped in front of a blast door that looked thick enough to survive a tactical nuke. The officer on the right swiped a keycard and scanned his retina. The heavy locking mechanism groaned, the sound vibrating through the soles of Elias's boots. The doors hissed open. Dr. Eris, the project lead, was waiting for him. She was a severe woman with hair the color of steel wool and a lab coat that was pristine to the point of obsession. She held a tablet against her chest like a shield. "Major Ward," she said, not offering her hand. "You are late." My shuttle got stuck in traffic behind a garbage scow. Elias deadpanned. So, where is this wonder weapon? Let me guess. It is a big gun, or maybe a really big bomb. Dr. Eris pursed her lips. It is neither. Project Jester is a non-kinetic deterrent system designed to eliminate entire armies without conventional collateral damage. Non-kinetic, Elias repeated. So we ask them nicely to leave? Follow me. She turned and marched into the chamber. Elias followed, his hand instinctively brushing the empty holster at his hip. They had made him check his sidearm at the airlock. He felt naked without it. The room was vast, a domed cathedral of technology dominated by banks of servers and quantum cooling towers that hummed with a low, throbbing frequency. In the center of the room, raised on a dais and surrounded by thick glass, was a chair. It looked like an electric chair designed by a jeweler. It was chrome and white leather, fitted with intricate harnesses and cables that snaked down from the ceiling, and sitting in the chair was a woman. Elias stopped dead. She was not human. That was obvious from the first glance, but she was humanoid enough to be unsettling. Her skin was a pale, iridescent violet, like oil on water. Intricate bioluminescent markings glowed softly along her collarbones and down her arms, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Her hair was a cascade of silver filaments that seemed to float slightly, unaffected by gravity. She wore a thin, white bodysuit that looked more like medical wrapping than clothing. Her eyes were closed, her head tipped back against the headrest. Is that? Elias started, pointing a finger. That is the core, Eris said clinically. Subject 894. We call her Kara. She is a Lyran, Elias said, his voice dropping. He had fought Lyrans in the First War. They were fast, telepathic, and vicious. He had seen them tear men in half with their minds before a railgun round could put them down, but he had never seen one like this. She looked refined, engineered, repurposed, Eris corrected, genetically modified to interface with our quantum systems. She is a prisoner of war. She is a component, Major. The woman in the chair opened her eyes. They were not the solid black eyes of the soldiers Elias had fought. These were luminous, swirling with gold and nebular blue. She turned her head slowly, the cables connected to the base of her skull shifting with a soft click. Her gaze landed on Elias, and he felt a physical weight press against his mind, like the pressure change before a storm. She looked him up and down, taking in the scuffed boots, the faded fatigue jacket, the scar that ran through his left eyebrow. Her expression was not one of fear. It was one of boredom. So, she said. Her voice was melodic but had an edge like shattered glass. This is the new handler. I was expecting someone taller. Elias blinked. The Lyrans he had fought spoke in screeching psychic bursts. This one spoke perfect English with a faint aristocratic accent. She talks, Elias said, glancing at Eris. I also listen, Kara said, her eyes narrowing. And I read, and I think, which puts me 3 steps ahead of you already. Major. Elias stepped closer to the glass, his curiosity overriding his caution. You have got a mouth on you for a component, he said. And you have a lot of fear in you for a soldier, she countered smoothly. I can smell it. It smells like stale alcohol and adrenaline. Eris stepped between them. Do not engage with the subject. Major, your job is to interface, not socialize. Interface? Elias looked from the scientist to the alien woman. You want me to plug into her? Jester functions by amplifying emotional states and encoding them into a quantum probability wave, Eris explained, as if reading from a manual. The Lyran physiology is unique. It acts as a prism. We feed in the raw data, targeting coordinates, threat assessments, and the core stabilizes the reality shift. But the core requires a human anchor to direct the emotional intent. Without a handler to focus the wave, the probability collapse is random. It could erase a mountain instead of a tank battalion. Elias stared at her. He felt like he had walked into a madhouse. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly. "You want to use her to shoot feelings at the enemy? And you want me to be the trigger?" "We want you to be the guidance system," Kara said from behind the glass. "The trigger is the hate. You humans have so much of it. It is practically a renewable energy source." Elias looked at her. There was something in her eyes, a deep, ancient sadness buried under the sarcasm. "And what happens to the enemy?" Elias asked. "You said no collateral damage." "They are removed," Eris said. "Removed? You mean killed?" "I mean removed. Major, erased. The probability of their existence at that specific coordinate is reduced to 0. They simply cease to be." Elias looked at the empty air next to him, then back at the alien. "That is impossible. It is physics," Eris said. "It is ridiculous," Elias muttered. Kara let out a short, sharp laugh. Finally, she said, "Someone who sees the absurdity of it. Welcome to the circus, Major. I am the freak show. You must be the clown." The briefing lasted for 4 hours. Elias learned about quantum entanglement, mnemonic encoding, and reality editing until his brain felt like it was leaking out of his ears. The gist of it was terrifyingly simple. The weapon did not blow things up. It edited the script of the universe so that the things they did not like had never been there in the first place. And Kara was the pen. He found her again later that evening, still in the chair. The technicians had dimmed the lights, leaving her illuminated only by the glow of the server banks and her own bioluminescence. The glass wall was still between them, but the audio link was open. He pulled up a chair and sat on the other side of the partition. "Do you ever sleep?" he asked. "Do you ever stop asking stupid questions?" she replied without opening her eyes. "I am just trying to be polite." "You are trying to assess the weapon," she said. She opened her eyes and turned to face him. "You are wondering if I am going to snap and melt your brain the moment we link up." The thought had crossed my mind. "It would be easy," she said softly. Her voice lacked the biting edge now. "It was just tired. Your minds are so open, no shielding, just raw noise, fear, hunger, lust, regret. It is loud, Major Ward. You can read my mind. I can taste your memories." Elias stiffened. "Stay out of my head." She tilted her head, studying him. "I do not have to try. You project it. The fire in the Shanghai sector, the woman in the red dress, the child with the broken doll. You carry them like stones in a sack." Elias stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "That is classified." "Everything is classified," Kyera said. "But the Directorate gave me access to your logs. To calibrate the interface. I have to know the handler. I know about the orbital bombardment orders you refused. I know about the court-martial that was swept under the rug. I know you hate this war." "Then why do you think I am here?" Elias snapped. "Because you hate yourself more," she said simply. Elias stared at her, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to shout, to tell her to shut up, to smash the glass. But he stood there, breathing hard, pinned by her luminous gaze. She was right. God help him. The alien witch was right. "You are a piece of work, Kara," he said, his voice low. "I am a mirror." "Elias," she replied, "if you do not like what you see, do not blame the reflection." The calibration test was scheduled for 0800 hours the next morning. Elias felt like he was walking to his execution. The technician strapped him into a chair identical to Kara's, positioned directly opposite her. A heavy harness locked over his chest. Clamps secured his wrists and ankles. Dr. Aris stood behind a blast shield, watching monitors, initiating neural handshake. She announced over the intercom, "Major, try to relax. This will feel intrusive." "That is a hell of a way to sell it," Elias muttered. He looked across the gap. Kara was watching him. The cables on her head were glowing brighter now, pulsing with a violet light that matched the markings on her skin. "Do not fight it," she said. Her voice was not coming from the speakers. It was inside his head. Elias gasped. It started as a hum at the base of his skull, like a drill spinning up. Then the wall dropped. It was not like a conversation, it was a tsunami. He was suddenly not in the chair. He was standing on a burning plain, the sky choked with ash. He looked up and saw human dropships descending like vultures, their thrusters scorching the air. He felt a terror that was not his own, a primal, telepathic scream of 1,000 minds crying out at once. He felt the heat of the plasma fire on his skin. He saw his sister, no, Kara's sister, disintegrate in a flash of white light. The grief hit him like a physical blow, bending him double. Then the perspective flipped. He was back in his own memory, but he was viewing it from the outside. He was holding a rifle, his hands shaking. The smoke of the Shanghai ruins was thick in his lungs. He was looking at the bodies of the civilians caught in the crossfire. He felt the cold, hard knot of self-hatred in his gut, the wish that the bullet had found him instead. He felt Kara's mind brush against that memory. She did not judge it. She examined it, turning it over like a dark jewel. She felt his regret. She felt his exhaustion. "Enough," she whispered in his mind. The connection snapped. Elias surged forward against the harness, gasping for air. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked across the room. Kara was slumped forward, her hair veiling her face. She was trembling. He looked down at his own hands. They were shaking. He could still feel her fear in his blood. He could still taste the ash of her homeworld. It was intimate. It was more intimate than sex, more intimate than prayer. He had been inside her soul, and she had been inside his. Medical teams rushed in, checking vitals. A technician reached for Elias to unbuckle him, but Elias shoved his hand away. "I am fine," he croaked. He looked at Kara. She raised her head slowly. Her bioluminescence was dim, flickering weakly. Her eyes met his, and for a second, the sarcasm and the soldierly posturing were gone. There was just a shared, horrified understanding. "You saw," she whispered. "I saw." He said, "Dr." Aris's voice cut through the air. "Neural synchronization at 94%. Excellent. The waveform is stable." Stable? Elias thought. He felt like he was going to throw up. He unbuckled himself, his fingers fumbling with the latches. He walked over to Kara's enclosure. The glass partition had retracted for the test. He stood in front of her. He reached out, hesitating, then placed a hand on her shoulder to steady her. Her skin was cool, but where his hand touched, the bioluminescent markings flared brighter, reacting to his bioelectric field. She flinched, then leaned into the touch, just for a fraction of a second before pulling back. "Do not," she hissed. "Do not what?" Elias asked softly. "Do not treat me like I am people," she said. "It makes it harder." "Harder to what?" "Harder to kill you when I get the chance." Elias let out a dry chuckle. "Fair enough." He helped her sit up. The technicians were wary, keeping their distance from the alien. But Elias stayed close. He could feel the heat radiating off her now, a feverish intensity. Eris came out from behind the shield, looking pleased. A successful calibration, she said. We are ready for the field test. Elias ignored her. He was looking at Kara. You okay? He asked. Kara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She leaned in close, her voice a whisper that the microphones could not pick up. You need to know, she said. Know what? What this thing does? Jester. It does not just kill. It rewrites. I know, Elias said. Eris told me. It erases them. No, Kara said, her grip tightening on his arm. Her nails dug into his flight suit. You do not understand. The Directorate has tested this before. I have seen the echoes in the system. There are holes in history, big ones. What kind of holes? She opened her mouth to speak, but suddenly her eyes went blank. Her body went rigid. A small implant behind her ear glowed red. She gasped, swallowing the words. Kara, Elias said, grabbing her shoulders. She shuddered and the light on the implant faded. She looked at him with panicked eyes. I cannot say, she whispered. The protocol. It stops me. Elias looked at the implant, then at Aris, who was watching them with suspicion. Major, step away from the core, Aris ordered. Elias held Kara's gaze for one more second. We will talk about this later, he promised. Kara looked away, her mask of indifference sliding back into place. There is no later, Major. There is only what they decide to keep. 2 days later, the order came down. A rogue faction of the outer colonies had seized an asteroid mining station. They were heavily armed, dug in deep. Conventional assault would cost thousands of lives. Perfect for a field test. Elias stood on the bridge of the stealth frigate UNS Phantom. The Jester unit had been installed in the center of the ship. A sealed clean room dropped right into the hull. He wore the neural harness. It felt heavier this time. Kara sat across from him. She looked regal and terrified. The captain's voice came over the comms. Target in range. Asteroid station Delta 9. Hostiles confirmed. Major Ward. You are clear to engage. Elias looked at the holographic display. He saw the red dots representing the enemy soldiers. Real people. Fathers. Sons. Rebels with a cause he probably would have agreed with if he bought them a beer. He looked at Kara. Ready to be ridiculous? He asked, trying to summon his usual cynicism. It felt thin. Kara did not smile. Just aim. Elias, I will do the rest. He closed his eyes, initiating link. The world dissolved. He was back in the white room of his mind. But this time, he was not alone. Kara was there, a pillar of violet light. He focused on the target. He felt the anger of the mission, the soldier's duty, the desire to end the threat. He pushed it toward her. She took it. He felt her twist it, amplifying the intent, weaving it into a mathematical impossibility. He felt a wave of nausea, a sense of wrongness that vibrated in his teeth. Fire, she whispered in his mind. He pushed the mental trigger and there was no sound, no explosion, no flash of light. On the bridge, the tactical officer gasped. Target. Gone. Elias opened his eyes. The display showed the asteroid. The station was there, the mining equipment was there, but the red dots were gone. Not dead, just gone. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. Did we get them? He asked. The tactical officer was typing furiously. Sir, the sensors are reading 0 life forms, but also 0 biomass, no bodies, no heat signatures. It is like they were never there. Elias looked at Kara. She was staring at her hands, horror etched on her face. He unbuckled and walked over to the console. He pulled up the mission log. Target elimination confirmed. The computer read. He scrolled back. He wanted to see the roster of the enemy unit. He wanted to know who he had just killed. File not found. He frowned. Computer. Display enemy personnel manifest. Data unavailable. No record found. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. He turned to the captain. Captain, who was commanding that station? The captain frowned, looking confused. He tapped his temple. I believe it was... Commander Vance? No, that is not right. The captain looked at the screen, his brow furrowed. That is strange, the captain murmured. I could have sworn there was a dossier. We must have had bad intel. Maybe the station was abandoned. Elias looked at the other officers. They were all nodding, accepting this new reality. The memory of the enemy was fading like a dream upon waking. Elias looked at Kara. She met his gaze, and in her eyes, he saw the terrifying truth. They hadn't just killed the enemy. They had cut them out of the story. And only he and Kara remembered they had ever existed. Elias felt a laugh bubbling up in his throat. A dark, hysterical thing. Humanity built the most ridiculous weapon, he thought. And God help us. It works. The red alert klaxons aboard the orbital station did not scream. They thrummed, a subsonic vibration that rattled the teeth and settled deep in the marrow of every bone. It was the frequency of imminent annihilation. Major Elias Ward stood by the viewport of the transport shuttle, watching the curve of Earth recede as they burned hard toward the rendezvous point. Beside him, the black vastness of space was no longer empty. It was teeming with the sharp, predatory silhouettes of United Earth Directorate warships. A swarm of steel locusts gathering to meet a threat that had materialized out of the dark like a nightmare. Warlord Korath, a splinter leader of the Lyran Empire who refused to recognize the armistice, had gathered a fleet. It was not a raiding party. It was an extermination force. 300 capital ships, bristling with plasma lances and kinetic bombardment arrays, sat on the edge of the Sol system, their engines burning violet against the star field. They were an hour away from firing range. Elias looked away from the window and glanced at the containment unit strapped to the deck in the center of the shuttle. It looked like a high-tech coffin, reinforced with plasteel and humming with magnetic locks. Inside sat Kara. She was not sleeping. Through the thick observation pane, he could see her eyes were open, glowing with a restless, feverish luminosity that illuminated the interior of her cell. "We are rushing into a slaughter," Elias said, his voice barely audible over the roar of the thrusters. Dr. Eris sat opposite him, clutching a datapad with white-knuckled intensity. She did not look up. "We are rushing to prevent one. Major, the Directorate has authorized full deployment. This is what Jester was built for." "It is unproven at this scale," Elias countered. "We deleted a mining station. That is a parlor trick compared to an armada. You are asking her to erase a fleet that creates a gravity well the size of a small moon." "The math holds," Eris snapped, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were hard, lacking the sleep Elias felt dragging at his own eyelids. "The core is stable. You are the variable, Major. Keep your head in the game, and we will make history today." Elias looked back at Kara. She turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes through the glass. She did not speak, but he felt a phantom pressure at the base of his skull, a ghostly echo of the link they shared. It was not a message. It was a sensation. Dread. The UNS Sovereign was the pride of the fleet, a command carrier the size of a city block, bristling with antennas and sensor arrays. It was the brain of the defense force, and deep within its armored belly lay the Jester integration chamber. It was not a lab this time. It was a throne room for a god of death. The chamber was a vast dome, the walls lined with holographic projectors that displayed a 360-degree view of the battle space. In the center, raised on a dais of obsidian-colored metal, were the two interface chairs. They faced the forward curve of the dome, looking out into the projected void where the enemy fleet burned closer. Technicians swarmed around them like worker ants, attaching leads, checking coolant flows, and reciting checklists in frantic, hushed tones. Elias sat in the handler's chair, the neural harness settling onto his shoulders with the heavy familiarity of a yoke across from him. Kara was being secured. She wore a new interface suit, woven with conductive filaments that shimmered in sync with her bioluminescence. She looked terrifyingly beautiful, a creature of light and geometry trapped in human machinery. "Major Ward, hearing me?" Colonel Vance's voice boomed from the command deck, overlooking the chamber from behind a wall of blast glass. "Loud and clear." "Colonel," Elias replied, checking his biometric readouts. "The enemy fleet has crossed the heliopause. They are charging weapons. We have 10 minutes before they are in effective bombardment range. We need a solution." "Major." Elias looked at Kara. The technicians were backing away, clearing the dais. The blast doors hissed shut, sealing them in the silence of the dome. "Kara," Elias said softly, "can you hear me?" She did not look at him. She was staring at the holographic projection of the enemy fleet. Her people. "I hear you." "Elias," she said. Her voice was steady, but he could see the tremor in her hands where they gripped the armrests. "I also hear them." "Them?" "The fleet," she whispered. "They are using open comms, battle chants, prayers to the void. They think they are coming to liberate the fallen. They think they are heroes. And what do you think?" She turned to him then. Her eyes were pools of swirling nebula, vast and impossibly sad. "I think I am about to become the greatest traitor in the history of my species." Elias felt a pang of sympathy that had no place in a soldier's heart. He pushed it down, but not before he saw Kara flinch. She had felt it, initiating neural link in 3, 2, 1. The world turned white. It was not like the calibration test. This was not a stream. It was an ocean. The connection slammed into Elias with the force of a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. He was no longer sitting in the chair. He was everywhere. He felt the cold vacuum of space. He felt the heat of the fusion drives. And then, the emotions hit him. He felt the terror of the human crew aboard the Sovereign, thousands of men and women thinking of their families on Earth, checking their life insurance policies, praying to gods they had ignored for years. It was a suffocating blanket of fear and weary resignation. They expected to die. Then, the current shifted. He felt Kara. It was a jagged, burning sensation. He felt her fierce pride in the ships approaching them, the elegance of their design, the bravery of the crews who had traveled light years to fight an enemy they considered monsters. He felt the memories of her childhood, looking up at similar ships in the violet skies of her homeworld. And beneath the pride, a bitter, corrosive acid. The knowledge that she was the weapon, she was the key, she was the traitor. The duality of it threatened to tear Elias apart. He was human and Lyran. He was defender and destroyer. He was the executioner and the condemned. Targeting solution locked. The computer's voice was a flat monotone that cut through the psychic storm. On the holographic display, the enemy fleet was a wall of red icons. They were launching fighters. Thousands of tiny specks detached from the main bodies of the capital ships, swarming toward the Earth defense line. "Fire." "Major," Vance ordered. His voice was tight. Elias tried to push the command through the link. It was a mental motion, like shoving a heavy door. "Target, Korath's fleet. Action, erase." He pushed, Nothing happened. The door would not budge. Kara was holding it shut. In the shared mindscape, Elias saw her. She was standing in the middle of a burning city, her arms spread wide, a wall of psychic force radiating from her. She was weeping. I cannot. Her voice echoed in his head. They are alive. They have names. If I do this, they do not just die. They go into the dark. No memory, no legacy. It is a sin against existence. Elias saw the tactical display in the real world. The enemy plasma lances were glowing white. First volley in 30 seconds. Kara. Elias spoke, not with his mouth but with his mind, projecting his voice into the burning city of her thoughts. I will not do it, she screamed back. I am not a gun. No, Elias said, stepping into the vision. He walked through the phantom fire, ignoring the heat. He walked until he stood directly in front of her. You are not a gun, and you are not a tool. He reached out and took her hands. In the mindscape, they were solid, warm. I am not going to order you to do this, Elias said softly. I am not your handler right now. I am just the man standing next to you. Kara looked up at him, her face streaked with glowing tears. If we do nothing, Elias continued, they will burn Earth. They will kill millions. That is the reality we are in. But we can change the script. It is murder, she whispered. It is war, Elias replied. But you do not have to carry it alone. I am right here. I am plugged into this nightmare with you. If we pull the trigger, my fingerprints are on it too. We share the weight. He squeezed her hands. Choose, Kara. Choose to save us, or choose to let them burn us. But choose. She stared at him, searching his soul. She saw no deception. She saw only a grim, shared resolve. He was offering her the only thing he had left, his own culpability. She took a breath. In the real world, her body arched against the restraints. In the mindscape, the fire turned from orange to a blinding, serene white. Together, she whispered. Together, Elias answered. She dropped the barrier. The energy that had been building up in the quantum capacitors of the Sovereign did not release as a beam. It did not travel through space. It bypassed space entirely. The pulse was silent. It was a ripple in the fabric of the universe, a luminous wave that expanded outward faster than light, washing over the approaching armada. Elias watched the tactical display. He watched the viewports. The enemy ships did not explode. There was no debris field, no expanding clouds of gas, no flashes of dying reactors. One moment, 300 capital ships and 10,000 fighters were filling the sky. The next moment, the stars were there. The ships simply ceased. It was as if a giant invisible hand had taken a brush and painted over them with the black of space. The velocity, the mass, the heat, all of it vanished in a singular nanosecond of correction. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence filled the bridge of the Sovereign. Technicians stood frozen, their hands hovering over consoles. The tactical display flickered, the red icons blinking out not one by one, but all at once. Target neutralized. The computer announced. The machine sounded almost confused. Elias slumped back in his chair, the breath rushing out of him. The link severed with a snap that left him reeling, his head pounding. He looked at Kara. She was limp in the restraints, her head hanging low. Her bioluminescence had gone dark, leaving her skin a pale, ashen gray. She was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. On the bridge, a young ensign, his face pale as milk, walked up to the main viewport. He pressed his hand against the glass, staring out at the empty void where an apocalypse had been seconds ago. He turned to look at the command deck, his eyes wide, unblinking, Humanity built the most ridiculous weapon, the ensign stammered, his voice cracking in the silence. Now it is erasing entire armies. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Someone laughed, a short manic sound that was quickly stifled. Then, the anomalies began. "Sir," the sensor officer shouted, his voice pitching up in panic. "I am losing telemetry logs. The recording of the battle, it is degrading." "What do you mean, degrading?" Vance barked, stepping forward. "The files are corrupting," the officer said. "Look, on the main screen, the playback of the last 10 minutes was playing. But where the alien ships should have been, there was only static. And then, nothing. The sensor log showed empty space. It is rewriting the data." Elias realized, it is not just the ships, it is the proof they were ever here. A commotion broke out at the navigation station. A female lieutenant was standing up, knocking her chair over. She was clutching her head. "My brother," she said, her voice trembling. He is on the Kestrel. The Kestrel was destroyed in the First War," Vance said, confused. 3 years ago. No." The lieutenant screamed, "No, he died today. I saw his fighter wing launch. I saw him on the sensors. He was right there." She pointed at the empty screen. "He was right there. And now I remember." She stopped, her eyes losing focus. She swayed. "I remember the telegram," she whispered. "We got the telegram 3 years ago, yet, but I just saw him." She collapsed into her chair, sobbing, burying her face in her hands. Elias looked around the room. He saw others rubbing their temples, blinking rapidly. A technician near him was staring at a photograph taped to his console, looking confused, as if he did not recognize the people in it. Déjà vu rippled through the room like a virus. The reality Jester had imposed was fighting with the reality the crew remembered, and the new reality was winning. Elias unbuckled his harness. His hands felt clumsy, detached. He stumbled over to Kara. Technicians were moving in now, but Elias shoved them aside. "Give her air," he snarled. He reached the glass enclosure and keyed the manual release. The cover slid back. "Kara," he said. She opened her eyes. They were not glowing. They were dull, human eyes now, filled with a pain that transcended physical injury. "We did it," she whispered. Her voice was dry, cracking. "Yeah," Elias said, his throat tight. "We did it. They are gone, Elias. Not dead, gone. Their mothers never held them. Their names are not written on any stones." Elias looked out at the bridge, at the confusion, the terror, the rewriting of history happening in real time. He forced a grin onto his face. It felt like a mask made of lead. "Well," he said, loud enough for the nearby crew to hear. "It is a cosmic eraser with a bad personality. Effective, though." He looked back at Kara. The humor did not reach his eyes. She looked back at him, and in that shared silence, the joke died. They both knew the truth. They had not just won a battle. They had violated the fundamental laws of existence, and the universe was bleeding. The debriefing was a blur of shouting voices and terrified politicians on screens. The Directorate was already spinning it, a secret weapon, a quantum stealth field. They were already suppressing the reports of the missing logs, the hallucinations, the contradictory memories. Elias sat through it all, saying nothing. He felt cold. When they finally released him, he did not go to his quarters. He went to the containment deck. Kara's suite was a step up from a cell, but not by much. It had a bed, a desk, and a viewport that looked out at the stars that were wrong now. The guard at the door moved to stop him. "No entry. Major." "Orders from—" Elias didn't break stride. He held up a small black keycard Colonel Vance had given him hours ago. A handler's override. "Open it," Elias said. The guard hesitated, then stepped back and swiped the panel. The door hissed open. Kara was sitting on the floor in the corner of the room, her knees pulled up to her chest. She was rocking slightly. The lights were dim. She looked up when he entered. She looked wrecked. Elias let the door close behind him. He walked over and sat down on the floor next to her, groaning slightly as his stiff joints protested. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped package. "Chocolate," he said. "Real stuff, not the synthetic ration bars. Stole it from the captain's private stash." Kara looked at the chocolate, then at him. "You are breaking protocol," she said. "I am breaking a lot of things today," Elias replied. "Protocol is the least of my worries." He unwrapped the foil and broke off a piece, holding it out to her. She took it tentatively. Her fingers brushed his. Her skin was ice cold. She placed the chocolate on her tongue and closed her eyes. "It is sweet," she whispered, "and bitter. Like life," Elias said, "or what is left of it." He ate a piece himself. The sugar hit his system like a drug. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Kara let out a shuddering breath. She leaned her head back against the wall. "It is not stopping." "Elias, the shifting. What do you see?" "I see my home," she said. Her voice was distant. "One moment, the sky is violet. The next, it is green. I remember walking through the great plaza of Tython. Then I blink, and the plaza is a crater. Then I blink again, and the plaza never existed because the city was built on the other side of the river." She turned to him, her eyes wide with panic. "My memories are fighting each other. I remember a sister. Her name was Lyra. She was a pilot. Then, suddenly, I am an only child. I remember her face, Elias. I can see her smile, but I also remember growing up alone. Which one is true?" She was trembling violently now. Elias reached out and took her hand. He interlaced his fingers with hers, grounding her. "I am here," he said. "I am real. This room is real. The chocolate is real." Kara gripped his hand so hard it hurt. "Is it?" she asked. "How do you know? How do you know you did not have a brother yesterday? How do you know we did not kiss 10 minutes ago and the timeline erased it?" Elias looked at her lips. The thought hung in the air, charged and dangerous. "I would remember that," he said softly. He squeezed her hand. "Focus on the now. Kara, the past is fluid. The future is a guess. But right now, you are sitting on a cold floor eating stolen chocolate with a war criminal. That is your anchor." She looked at him, searching his face for stability. "First date snacks with a war crime," she murmured, a ghost of her smile returning. "You really know how to woo a girl." "Major." "I try," Elias said. They sat there in silence for a long time. The trembling in her body began to subside, replaced by an exhaustion that was heavy and shared. She shifted, leaning sideways until her shoulder pressed against his. It was a hesitant movement, testing the waters. Elias did not pull away. He leaned back against her, offering his warmth. He could feel the hum of the interface ports on her back through the thin fabric of her suit. He could feel the slow, steady rhythm of her alien heart. "It is going to get worse, is it not?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Elias said, staring at the blank wall opposite them. "They are going to want to use it again. I cannot do it again." "Elias, I felt the universe scream, I know." He looked at her. Her profile was sharp against the dim light, her expression vulnerable in a way he had never seen. We will figure something out, he said. We are just two people, she said, against an empire. Two people who can rewrite history, Elias reminded her. That is a hell of an edge. She turned her head, and their faces were inches apart. He could smell the ozone scent of her skin, mixed with the sweetness of the chocolate. You are dangerous, Elias Ward, she whispered. You have no idea, he said. For a moment, he thought she might lean in the rest of the way. The air between them crackled with the same electricity he had felt in the neural link, the confusing, terrifying mix of shared trauma and undeniable attraction. But she just rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. Stay, she whispered, just for a little while, before the world changes again. I am not going anywhere, Elias said. He sat there, holding the hand of the weapon that had just erased an army, and listened to the silence of the ship. Outside, the stars were wrong. History was broken, but in the small, dim room, this one moment felt like the only true thing left in the universe. The news feeds from Earth were a kaleidoscope of patriotic fervor and terrified speculation. The United Earth Directorate had released footage of the incident with Warlord Korath's fleet. But it had been surgically altered. The ships did not simply vanish in the official edit. They were shown retreating in a panicked blur. Cowed by a vague, blinding light labeled as a classified hyperweapon. It was a lie designed to project strength without inciting panic. But the cracks were already showing. Rival political blocs, the European Coalition and the Martian Trade Syndicate, were demanding oversight. They smelled blood in the water. They knew the Directorate had something that defied the laws of physics, and they wanted their fingers on the trigger. Major Elias Ward watched the political theater on a monitor in the mess hall of the UNS Sovereign, stirring a cup of synthetic coffee that tasted like burnt copper. He looked around the room. The crew was tense. There were too many hushed conversations, too many people rubbing their foreheads as if trying to massage away a headache that sat right behind the eyes. The ship was haunted, not by ghosts, but by the things that were no longer there. We have a new target package. Major, a voice said behind him. Elias did not turn. He knew the voice. It was Lieutenant Cale, a young officer who looked like he had not slept in a week. Let me guess, Elias said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. Another surgical strike? Sector 7, Insurgent Communications Hub. Command wants it gone before the peace talks in Geneva tomorrow. Gone, Elias repeated. Not destroyed, gone. Cale flinched at the word. Just get to the chamber, Major. She is waiting. The missions had become a routine of nightmares. They called them surgical strikes, a clinical term for an act that was anything but clean. Over the last 2 weeks, Elias and Kara had deployed Jester 5 times. First, it was a weapons depot on a moon of Jupiter, then a convoy of separatist frigates, then a listening post buried in an asteroid. Each time, the process was the same. The neural link, the shared flood of adrenaline and dread, the silent, invisible pulse, and then the void. But the aftermath was getting stranger. Elias walked into the dome. Kara was already in the chair, her head tipped back, her eyes tracking the movement of technicians on the gantry above. She looked thinner. The bioluminescence on her skin was dimmer, pulsing with a slow, erratic rhythm. Ready for another round of cosmic editing? Elias asked as he sat in his own chair. Kara turned her head. Her expression was unreadable. I dreamt of a city last night. Elias, she said softly. It had spires made of blue glass and bridges that sang in the wind. I walked its streets. I bought fruit from a vendor with 3 eyes. I felt the sun on my face. That sounds nice, Elias said, buckling his harness, It does not exist, she said, her voice dropping. I checked the star charts. I checked the archives of my people. There is no such city. There never was. But I remember the taste of the fruit. I remember the song of the bridges. Elias paused, his hands freezing on the buckles. Phantom data, he said. Residue from the erasures. It is not residue, Kara insisted. It is displacement. When we cut a hole in reality, the universe tries to fill it. It is stuffing my head with things that might have been, memories of lives that were never lived. Major. We are on the clock. Eris's voice cut in over the intercom. Initiate link. Elias looked at Kara. Stay with me, he said. Just focus on my voice. Ignore the glass cities. He closed his eyes. The link slammed into place. The target was a small moon base, a cluster of domes on a gray rock. Elias felt the now familiar sensation of Kara's mind, a vast, cool library of sensation. But the library was disorganized. Books were falling off the shelves. He saw flashes of the blue city she had mentioned. He saw a face he did not recognize, smiling at him from a photograph that burned in a fireplace. Focus, he projected. Kara drew in a sharp mental breath. She stabilized the wave. Targeting, she whispered. The pulse fired. The moon base vanished. But this time, the ripple effect was immediate. Elias opened his eyes, gasping for air as the link severed. He looked at the tactical map on the main wall. The moon was empty. Wait, Elias said, squinting at the display. He pointed to the label of the star system. System Alpha Centauri 4. The label read, Elias frowned. Computer, he said loud enough for the room to hear. What system are we in? Current location, Alpha Centauri 4, the computer replied. Elias turned to Eris, who was standing on the command deck. That was Alpha Centauri 3 this morning, Elias said. I filed the flight plan myself. Eris looked at him, confused. Major, we have always been stationed in Sector 4. 3 is a gas giant system. It has no habitable moons. Elias felt a cold shiver walk down his spine. He looked at the navigation officer. Lieutenant, confirm sector. Sector 4, sir, the lieutenant said, looking at Elias like he was having a stroke. Always has been. Elias looked at Kara. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with terror. She remembered it too. She remembered the 3 on the charts. The firing had not just erased the base. It had retroactively changed the designation of the entire star system to make the erasure fit the narrative of history. The universe was gaslighting them. That night, Elias found Kara in the gravity garden. It was an observation deck on the upper hull of the Sovereign, enclosed in a transparent aluminum dome. Inside, the gravity was kept at a low 0.5 Gs to allow for the growth of exotic tall-stalked flora from 3 different worlds. It was a jungle of bioluminescent ferns and floating orchids, a place of quiet beauty in a ship designed for war. Kara was standing by the edge of the dome, looking out at the stars. She wore a simple gray tunic the medical staff had given her, the back cut low to accommodate the spinal ports. Elias walked up beside her. The low gravity made his steps light, almost bouncing. Hide and seek, he asked. I am not hiding, she said, not looking away from the void. I am waiting. For what? For the stars to change positions? Elias leaned against the railing. Eris says the crew's psychological profiles are holding steady. They do not know things are changing. Their brains rewrite the memories to match the new reality. But we know, Kara said. She turned to him. Why us, Elias? Why do we keep the old scars? Because we are the knife, Elias said grimly. The knife has to know what it cuts, or it is useless. Kara sighed. a sound that seemed too heavy for her slender frame. She reached out and touched the petal of a floating orchid. It curled around her finger, glowing a soft pink. "Tell me about this," she said. "About flowers. About intimacy." Elias blinked. "That is a pivot. I have been analyzing the human data in the archives," she said, letting the flower go. "You are a species obsessed with conquest. You build ships to kill people you have never met. You burn worlds for resources you do not need. And yet, 70% of your art, your music, your literature is about mating, bonding, love." She looked at him with genuine curiosity. "Why? Why make yourself vulnerable in a world you are so intent on destroying?" Elias looked at the flower, then out at the cold, hard stars. "Because the world is hard," he said, "and cold. And if you do not have something soft to hold on to, you turn into stone." "Is that what happened to you?" she asked. "Did you turn to stone?" Elias laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I was on my way." He turned to face her fully. "I had a wife once, before the First War. Her name was Sarah. She was a teacher. She taught history. She left. After my third tour, she said I came back wrong. Said I looked at her like she was a target assessment. She tried to touch me one night, just a hand on my shoulder, and I nearly broke her wrist. Reflex." Kara watched him, her eyes searching his face. "You were afraid," she said. "I was numb," Elias corrected. "That is worse. Fear keeps you alive. Numbness just makes you a machine. She asked me to feel something, anything. I could not, so she left, and I did not blame her." "So you fight to protect a concept you can no longer experience," Kara mused. "That is tragic." "Elias, it is efficient," he countered. He looked at her. The lights of the garden reflected in her eyes, swirling with the gold and blue of her irises. "What about you?" he asked. "Lyrans, you are telepathic. Intimacy must be different. It is absolute," she said softly. "When we bond, we do not just share bodies. We share minds. There are no secrets and no lies. You cannot hide the stone in your heart from someone who is inside it." "That sounds terrifying." "It is, but it is also true." She took a step closer to him. The low gravity made the movement fluid, like she was drifting underwater. "I feel your stone, Elias," she whispered. "In the link. It is cracking." Elias felt his breath hitch. She was standing close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The scent of her was distinct, ozone and something sweet, like cinnamon. Suddenly, Kara gasped. Her hand flew to her temple. Her knees buckled. Elias moved instantly. He caught her before she hit the deck, his arm sweeping around her waist to support her. The momentum swung them around, and he braced himself against the railing, holding her tight. "Neural aftershock?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. She nodded, her forehead resting against his chest. She was trembling. "It is the city," she murmured. "The glass city. It is trying to right itself over the ship." "Breathe," Elias ordered gently. "Just breathe. You are here. You are in the garden." He ran his other hand up her back to steady her. His palm brushed against the bare skin between her shoulder blades, right where the neural ports glowed with a faint, violet light. The contact sent a jolt through him, not electric, but biological, a sudden, sharp awareness of her. Kara stiffened at the touch, then melted into it. She lifted her head, looking up at him. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. "Elias," she whispered. He looked down at her. He saw the confusion in her face, the war between the soldier she had been and the woman she was becoming. He saw his own reflection in her eyes, a man who had thought he was stone, now realizing he was terrifyingly flesh and blood. This is a bad idea, Elias said, his voice rough. Probably. Kara agreed. She leaned in. He did not pull away. His hand on her waist tightened, pulling her closer. The air between them seemed to vibrate, charged with the energy of two species that should be enemies finding the only common ground left in the universe. Her lips parted. He lowered his head. The red alert klaxon screamed. It shattered the moment like a hammer hitting glass. Kara jerked back, her eyes snapping to the door. Elias spun around, putting himself between her and the entrance, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm he wasn't wearing. Security breach in the archive core. The computer announced, unauthorized access detected, locking down Sector Gamma. The archive core, Elias said. That is where the Jester logs are kept. The door to the garden hissed open. A squad of Marines burst in, rifles raised. They were not aiming at the door. They were aiming at Kara. "Secure the subject!" the lead Marine shouted. "Hey!" Elias barked, stepping forward. "Lower your weapons! Step aside. Major!" the Marine yelled. "We have a digital trail leading right to her signature." "She is hacking the mainframe. That is impossible." Elias shouted. "She has been with me the whole time. Tell it to the colonel. Now grab her." Two Marines rushed past Elias. He moved to intercept, but Kara put a hand on his arm. "Do not," she said quietly. "They are scared. Elias, if you fight, they will shoot." She looked at the Marines with a calm, regal disdain. "I surrender," she said. "I have nowhere to run to. Anyway." The interrogation room was a metal box with a table bolted to the floor. Kara sat on one side, hands cuffed to the table. Elias stood by the wall, arms crossed, glaring at Colonel Vance. "This is a witch hunt." "Vance," Elias said. His voice was cold, sharp as a razor. "We traced the intrusion to her neural ID," Vance said, slapping a datapad onto the table. "It is right there, a direct line from the containment unit to the classified archives. She was trying to access the primary source code for Jester." Elias picked up the datapad. He scrolled through the logs, his eyes narrowing. Then he let out a short, mocking laugh. "You have got to be kidding me. What is funny?" "Major," Vance demanded. "Look at the timestamp," Elias said, tossing the pad back. 2100 hours. We were in the garden. There are no terminals in the garden. Unless you think she telepathically hacked a hardline server through 3 feet of lead shielding. She is an alien. Vance spat. "We do not know what she can do." "I know what she cannot do," Elias said. "She cannot be in 2 places at once. And look at the routing path." He leaned over the table, pointing at the screen. The signal bounced through the maintenance subgrid on Deck 4. Why would a super-intelligent alien hacker route her attack through the janitor's closet? Maybe she made a mistake. Or maybe, Elias said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, someone used her ID as a mask. Someone who has physical access to Deck 4. Someone who wanted it to look like the alien did it so you would stop looking for the real leak. Vance stared at him. "Are you accusing my crew?" "I am accusing your security protocols of being garbage," Elias said. "If she wanted to hack you." "Colonel, she would not steal files. She would interface with the core and delete your grandfather from history so you were never born to annoy me." Kara snorted. She tried to hide it, but a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Vance looked between them, his face reddening. "She stays in containment," he growled, "under double guard. And you, Major, you are on thin ice." Vance grabbed the datapad and stormed out of the room. Elias waited until the door clicked shut. He turned to Kara. "Nice smile," he said. "You defend me well," she said. "For a human, Elias walked over to the table and sat on the edge of it. I did not lie. That hack was clumsy. It was a plant. But who? Kara asked. And why? That is what I am going to find out. Elias spent the next hour crawling through the maintenance shafts of Deck 4. He had told the deck officer he was inspecting a faulty conduit, a lie that worked because nobody wanted to go into the shafts. He found the terminal in a small alcove near the atmospheric scrubbers. It was a localized access point used for diagnostics. He didn't touch it. He just listened. Voices were drifting through the grate from the room below. The secondary server room. Close call, a voice said. It was male, nervous. We diverted it to the alien, a second voice replied. Deeper, authoritative. Vance bought it. Why are we even archiving this stuff? The first voice asked. If the Directorate finds out we kept the logs from Colony 7. Insurance, the second voice said. If the High Command ever decides to cut us loose, we have proof. We have proof that Jester was not built for the war. What do you mean? It is a timeline sanitizer, you idiot. The war with the Lyrans is just the field test. The real targets are closer to home. The separatist leaders on Mars. The Union heads in the belt. Anyone who rocks the boat. They do not want to negotiate with rebels. They want to unhappen them. Elias felt the blood freeze in his veins. Timeline sanitizer. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mute button for democracy. He waited until the voices faded, then slipped back out of the shaft. He needed to get to Kara. Getting into the archives was impossible for a human. The encryption was quantum state, changing every nanosecond. But Elias had a key. He broke Kara out of containment using a looped security feed and a stolen uniform. It was sloppy, desperate tradecraft. But the chaos of the hack earlier had left the guards distracted. They made it to the archive server room. It was a cold, dark forest of blinking lights. Can you do this? Elias asked, watching the door. Kara stood before the main interface. She pulled the glove off her right hand. Her fingers were glowing. The system is designed to keep you out, she said. But I am part of the system now. My DNA is the encryption key. She placed her hand on the panel. The filaments in her skin flared. The console whined, then turned from red to green. We are in, she said. Search for Colony 7, Elias ordered, and check the civilian uprising folders. Kyara's fingers flew across the holographic interface. Files cascaded open. Videos, maps, census data. Here, she said. Her voice shook. Elias looked at the screen. It was a report from 3 years ago. Colony 7, a mining settlement on the rim. The official history said it was destroyed by a reactor breach, a tragic accident. Kara opened the recovered file. It was not a reactor. The video showed the colony intact. Then, a Jester prototype, a massive ground-based array fired. The colony did not explode. It faded. The buildings turned transparent, then vanished, the people. Elias looked away. He saw a mother holding a child, and then he saw empty air. The file designation read, Test Subject 001, Objective, Suppression of Worker Revolt. Result, Successful Erasure. They used it on their own people, Kara whispered. She looked at Elias, horror dawning in her eyes. It was never about us. The war with my people. It is just an excuse to perfect the technology. Elias stared at the screen. He felt sick. He felt a rage so pure and hot it burned away the last remnants of his numbness. They killed them, he said, and then they deleted the crime. He looked at Kara. She was trembling again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from fury. Her bioluminescence flared a deep, angry crimson. We have been helping them, she said. Every time we fire, We are sharpening the blade they will use to cut the throat of your civilization. Elias reached out and took her hand. He pulled her away from the console. Not anymore, he said. He looked her in the eye. We are not going to be their erasers. Kara. We are going to be the glitch. Kara looked at him. The bond between them, forged in trauma and shared mind space, snapped into a new configuration. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was an alliance. A pact. What do we do? She asked. We go back, Elias said. We play along, and we wait for the next order. He squeezed her hand. And when they tell us to fire, we miss. Kara's eyes searched his. If we miss, they will kill us. If we do not, Elias said, glancing back at the empty space where Colony 7 used to be, then we are already dead. We just have not vanished yet. Kara nodded slowly. She squeezed his hand back. Together, she said. Together, Elias affirmed. They slipped out of the archives, leaving the ghosts of the erased behind them, carrying a secret that weighed more than the ship itself. The most ridiculous weapon was about to turn around and point itself at the hand that held it. The holographic projection in the briefing room spun slowly, a marble of azure and emerald suspended in the air. To the casual observer, the planet looked like a paradise. To Major Elias Ward, it looked like a bullseye. Gentlemen, officers, Colonel Vance said, his voice smooth and rehearsed. We stand on the brink of a new era. For decades, the war with the Lyrans has defined our existence. Today, we redefine it. Vance gestured to the globe. This is the colony of Othara. It has recently been identified as a staging ground for radical separatists, both human and Lyran, who threaten the stability of the armistice. These insurgents reject the authority of the United Earth Directorate and the Lyran High Council. They preach anarchy under the guise of coexistence. Elias sat in the back row, his arms crossed over his chest. He watched Vance's face, looking for the tell. Every liar had one. Vance's was a slight twitch in his left eyelid when he used words like stability. We have entered into a historic agreement with the Lyran Loyalist faction. Vance continued. This will be a joint operation, a peacekeeping mission to sanitize the sector and remove this cancerous element. Codename, Operation Clean Slate. Clean slate, Elias thought. Subtle. The plan is simple, Vance said, the hologram shifting to show a tactical grid. The allied Lyran fleet will form a blockade. The UNS Sovereign will move to high orbit. Jester will be deployed to eliminate the insurgent stronghold. One of the younger captains raised a hand. Sir, the intelligence report lists Othara as a civilian agricultural hub. Population density is high. Estimates put it at 2 million souls. Vance nodded solemnly. Regrettable, Captain. But these insurgents use human shields. They have embedded themselves so deeply into the civilian infrastructure that conventional extraction is impossible. That is why Jester is necessary. It offers a surgical solution. We remove the threat. We minimize suffering. Minimize suffering, Elias muttered under his breath, by making sure no one is left to suffer. Vance caught the murmur. His eyes snapped to Elias. Do you have a comment, Major Ward? Elias uncrossed his arms. He felt the weight of the room press against him. Just admiring the branding, Colonel, Elias said, his voice flat. Peacekeeping through total erasure. It has a ring to it. Vance's jaw tightened. Dismissed. Major Ward, remain behind. The room cleared out, officers filing past Elias with eyes averted. When the door hissed shut, Vance walked over to him. You are walking a fine line, Elias, and you are preparing to murder 2 million people, Elias replied. Vance leaned in close. I am preparing to save billions. If this insurrection spreads, if the idea that we can just hold hands and sing songs with the enemy takes root, the entire defense grid collapses. We need order. And tomorrow, we are going to get it. He poked a finger into Elias's chest. Get your pet ready, Major. We jump in 12 hours. Elias found Kara in her containment suite. She was not sitting in the corner this time. She was standing by the viewport, staring out at the warp tunnel that streaked past the ship, a kaleidoscope of stretched starlight. She did not turn when he entered. They are lying, she said. I know, Elias said, the door locking behind him. I decrypted the targeting packet, she said, turning to face him. Her eyes were burning with a cold, furious light. Othara is not an insurgent base. It is a dual-species colony, humans and Lyrans living together. They have a shared council. They have interspecies schools. They have built a society that proves the war is a lie. That is why they want it gone, Elias said, leaning against the doorframe. It threatens the narrative. If people see that we can live together, they will stop buying the Directorate's guns. It is worse than that, Kara said. She walked over to the small desk where a stolen datapad lay open. I found the Lyran transmission logs. My government, the High Council, they are the ones who requested the strike. They are terrified. Othara is proof that their genetic purity laws are obsolete. They want to erase it to maintain their control over the bloodlines. She looked up at Elias, her face twisted in disgust. It is a conspiracy of tyrants. Elias, humans and Lyrans, shaking hands over a button that deletes the opposition, and they are using me to do it. She paced the small room, her movements agitated, predatory. I will not do it, she hissed. I will not. You might not have a choice, Elias said quietly. She stopped and glared at him. There is always a choice. Not when they have the override, Elias said. I heard the technicians talking. They are upgrading your neural shackle. Level 5 compliance. Level 5, Kara repeated. That is lobotomy protocol. It bypasses the conscious mind entirely. They are scared of you, Kara. They know you are resisting. Then help me stop them, she shouted. How? Elias shot back, pushing off the doorframe. We are on a ship surrounded by 3,000 Marines. We are jumping into a fleet of Allied warships. If we blink wrong, they put a bullet in my head and they strap you down and force the firing sequence anyway. So we just follow orders? Kara stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. Is that it? Major, the good soldier, you will sit in that chair, hold my hand, and help me murder 2 million innocents because you are too afraid to die trying to stop it. Do not put this on me, Elias snapped. I am trying to keep us alive. Alive for what? To be monsters? Kara's hands were shaking. You are just like them. You hide behind your cynicism and your dark jokes, but when it comes down to it, you obey. You are a coward. Elias. The word hung in the air, sharp and stinging. Elias felt a flash of anger, hot and bright. He stepped into her space. I am the only reason you are not being dissected in a lab right now, he growled. I have put my neck on the block for you every single day. Because you feel guilty, Kara yelled back. Not because you care. You just want to wash the blood off your hands. Elias grabbed her shoulders. He meant to shake her, to make her listen, but the moment his skin touched the interface fabric of her suit, something snapped. Kara gasped, her eyes flaring wide. She did not pull away. Instead, she slammed her mental barriers down. Look at me, she screamed in his mind. It was not a request. It was a forced link. The room dissolved. Elias was suddenly drowning in black water. It was cold, freezing his lungs. But it was not water. It was hate. He felt her self-loathing, a jagged shard of glass in her gut. He felt the horror of the memories that were not hers, the ghost cities, the dead sisters, the erased lovers. He felt the crushing weight of being a tool, an object, a thing used to unmake the world. And beneath the hate, he felt the terror. She was a child in the dark, screaming for someone to hold her hand. But everyone who touched her turned to dust. "See me," her voice echoed in the void. "Do not look at the weapon. See me." Elias fought against the current. He pushed back. "I see you." He projected. He poured his own mind into the link. He did not use words. He used raw, unfiltered sensation. He showed her the way he looked at her when she wasn't looking. He showed her the awe he felt when she challenged Vance. He showed her the quiet moments in the gravity garden, the way the light caught the curve of her neck, the way her sarcasm made him feel like he was waking up after a 10-year coma. He showed her that he didn't see a monster. He saw the only person in the universe who understood the language of his scars. "I am not a soldier," he thought at her, the emotion burning like a flare in the dark. "Not anymore. I am just yours." The black water receded. They slammed back into reality. Elias was breathing hard, his hands still gripping her shoulders. Kara was staring up at him, her chest heaving, her pupils blown wide. "You," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "You feel everything." Elias finished hoarsely. He looked at her mouth. It was trembling. The air in the room was thick with ozone and the scent of charged neurons. The link was still humming in the background, a static charge that made the hair on his arms stand up. Kara made a small, broken sound in her throat. Elias didn't think, he didn't strategize. He moved. He crashed his mouth onto hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the collision of two people standing on the edge of a cliff. Kara responded instantly. Her hands flew up to grip his hair, pulling him down. Her body pressed against his, hard and unyielding. The moment their lips touched, the neural feedback spiked. It was blinding. Elias felt her arousal as if it were his own. A sharp, electric heat that started in his chest and pooled in his groin. He felt her guilt, her longing, her need to be consumed, and she felt his. She tasted the rough edge of his desire, the protective fury, the sheer, overwhelming want that he had been bottling up for weeks. It was erotic in a way that defied biology. It was two nervous systems wiring themselves together, short-circuiting the logic centers, leaving only the raw, animal need to connect. He groaned into her mouth, his hands sliding down her back, tracing the spine where the ports glowed. She arched into him, a whimper escaping her throat that vibrated in his own chest. For a moment, they were not human in Lyran. They were just energy and heat, fused together in a defiance of everything the universe had told them they should be. Elias pulled back, gasping for air. He rested his forehead against hers. Their breath mingled, hot and ragged. "We are in trouble," he whispered. Kara let out a shaky laugh, her eyes still closed. "We are catastrophic," she murmured. She opened her eyes. The bioluminescence on her skin was pulsing rapidly, a chaotic rhythm of pink and violet. "Elias," she said, her voice serious now. "We cannot let them fire, not at Othara. If we erase that colony, we erase the possibility of us. We erase the proof that this," she gestured between them, "can exist." "I know," Elias said. "But the override, I have a plan," she said. "It is reckless. It might kill us." "I like those odds better than zero," Elias said. "Let us hear it." She pulled away slightly, her eyes sharp and calculating. "The Jester wave is a directed probability collapse," she explained. "We usually aim it at a coordinate in space, but the targeting data comes from the sovereign's central computer. It flows through the neural matrix before it is projected. Okay, Elias said. Instead of projecting it outward, Kara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, I can reflect it. Reflect it? I can create a feedback loop, a mirror in the quantum stream. When the firing command comes, I will accept the energy, but I will not release it at the planet. I will bounce it back through the targeting uplink. Elias stared at her. You want to shoot the ship? No. The ship is physical matter. Gesture erases information. I want to target the data. I want to target the archives, the mission logs, the conspiracy files, the AI cores that hold the Directorate's lies. Decapitation strike, Elias realized. You want to lobotomize the command structure. If I target the specific data signatures of the conspiracy, the orders, the false histories, the blackmail material, I can wipe it all. They will wake up with blank hard drives and no memory of why they are at war. And the planet? Shielded. The energy goes up the pipe, not down. Elias ran a hand over his face. Kara, the amount of energy required to invert the wave inside the chamber. It could shatter the containment. It could shatter you. My mind is already shattered. Elias, she said softly. At least this way. The pieces mean something. Elias looked at her. She was terrified. He could feel it in the residual link, a cold, gnawing fear of the void. But her resolve was harder than diamond. We need to test it, Elias said. If we try this cold, we might just erase ourselves and leave the ship intact. There is a simulation subroutine in the maintenance access, Kara said. We can run a low-power model. They huddled under the desk, using the stolen datapad to access the maintenance server again. Kara's fingers moved like blur, coding the inversion parameters. Ready? She whispered. Running simulation. On the small screen, a wireframe model of the Sovereign appeared. A red beam represented the gesture wave. In the simulation, the beam started to form. Then, it hit a virtual barrier, Kara's mind. It folded back on itself, racing up the data stream. The results were chaotic. On the screen, the data nodes of the ship turned gray, signifying erasure. But then, the lines of causality began to snap. In the simulation, the ship didn't just lose data, it began to flicker. The simulation predicted localized reality shears, corridors leading to nowhere. Time loops in the mess hall, crew members merging with bulkheads. Kara flinched, clutching her head. What is wrong? Elias asked. I can see it. She gasped. The simulation. It is not just math. I can see the timelines branching. She squeezed her eyes shut. In one branch, we succeed. The conspiracy dies. In another, the feedback kills me instantly. In another, the ship implodes. In another... She stopped, her breath hitching. In another, you never met me. You are still on Earth. You are happy. Kara, Elias said, gripping her arm. Stay here. Stay in this timeline. She opened her eyes. They were unfocused. It is fragile. Elias, the reflection. It requires absolute focus. If I slip, even for a microsecond, the wave goes wild. It could erase the sun, but it is the only play we have. Elias said. Yes, she whispered. It is. Launch day arrived with the subtlety of a funeral procession. 2 armed guards escorted Elias from his quarters. They did not speak to him. They marched him to the medical bay, not the command deck. Inside, Dr. Eris was waiting. She was wearing surgical gloves. Kara was already there, strapped onto a vertical tilting table. She looked pale, defeated. What is this? Elias demanded, trying to step forward. The guards held him back. Pre-mission prep, Eris said coldly. We are installing the level 5 regulator. You do not need to cut her open, Elias said, fighting the panic rising in his chest. She is compliant. Compliance is variable, Eris said, picking up a device that looked like a chrome staple gun. Control is absolute. She approached Kara. Kara looked at Elias. She did not struggle. She did not scream. She just held his gaze. Remember the garden. She projected into his mind. Remember the chocolate. Aris placed the device against the base of Kara's skull, right over the primary neural port. There was a pneumatic hiss, a sickening crunch of metal-piercing bone. Kara's body arched against the straps. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled back, glowing a blinding, chaotic white. Then she slumped. Eris checked the readout on the device. Implant active. Neural pathways rerouted to command authorization. She is ready? Elias felt a cold rage settle in his stomach. It was a heavy, dense thing. You better hope she still works. Doc, Elias said, his voice low. She will work, Eris said, wiping a speck of violet fluid from the device. She has no choice now. They unstrapped Kara. She stood up, but her movement was mechanical. Her eyes were dull, the light behind them extinguished. She looked at Elias, but there was no recognition. No spark. Kara, Elias said softly. Subject ready for transport. Kara said. Her voice was flat, robotic. Elias felt his heart stop. Eris smiled. See? Perfect obedience. Humanity finally figured out how to put a leash on its ridiculous weapon. Elias walked over to Kara. He stood right in front of her. Kara, he whispered. She stared through him. But then, just for a second, her left hand twitched. Her pinky finger brushed against his, a microscopic movement, and deep in his mind, buried under layers of static and forced code, he heard a whisper. I am still here. Elias looked at Eris. He forced a smile that felt like a snarl. Let us go make history, he said. The Sovereign hung in the void above Othara. The planet was a blue jewel against the dark. Below, millions of people were waking up, eating breakfast, going to work, unaware that a gun was pointed at their existence. The jester chamber was fully manned. Colonel Vance stood on the observation deck, looking down like a king. Elias sat in the chair. Kara sat opposite him. The harness clicked into place. The new implant on her neck was an ugly, angry red, initiating Operation Clean Slate. Vance's voice boomed. Target locked. Colony Othara. Elias looked at Kara. She was staring straight ahead. Kara, he thought, can you hear me? Static. Kara, we have to do this. Nothing. Neural link active. The computer announced. The world went white. Elias was thrown into the mindscape. But it was different this time. It wasn't a library. It was a prison. He saw walls of gray code. He saw chains made of algorithms wrapping around a glowing violet light in the center. The light was Kara. She was trapped, bound by the Level 5 protocol. Elias. Her voice was faint, coming from inside the cage. I cannot move. The command, it is too strong. Elias mentally threw himself against the code walls. They were solid iron. Targeting solution accepted. The mechanical voice of the implant echoed through the shared mind. Preparing erasure wave. Outside, in the real world, the capacitors began to whine. The air in the chamber ionized. No! Elias screamed in the void. Fight it! I cannot! Kara cried. It is rewriting my will. Elias looked at the cage. He looked at the chains. He remembered the kiss. He remembered the heat. He remembered the raw, messy humanity of it. You are not a machine, Elias roared. You are the woman who stole my chocolate. You are the woman who dreams of glass cities. He focused all his will, all his love, all his desperation into a single mental image. He showed her the simulation, the branching paths, the choice. Choose me, Kara, he shouted. Do not choose the order. Choose me. The violet light inside the cage pulsed. Elias, I am right here. Take my hand. He reached through the bars of the code. It burned. It felt like sticking his hand into a fusion reactor. But he pushed. Inside the cage, the violet light solidified into the shape of Kara. She looked at his hand. Then she looked at the chains. Ridiculous weapon, she whispered. She grabbed his hand. The contact shattered the code. The cage exploded. In the real world, Kara's head snapped up. Her eyes ignited with a blinding supernova brilliance. The implant on her neck sparked and began to smoke. Major, Eris shouted over the comms. Readings are spiking. What is happening? She is waking up, Elias yelled, a savage grin breaking across his face. Kara looked at him across the chamber. The robotic dullness was gone. In its place was a terrifying, divine focus. Now! Elias! She screamed in his mind. Hold the line! She threw her head back. The gesture wave fired, but it didn't go out. It went in. The void above the planet Othara was no longer empty. It was a congested sea of alloy and aggression. The United Earth Directorate Fleet, flanked by the angular insectile warships of the Lyran Loyalist faction, formed a tightening noose around the world. To the casual observer on the ground, the sky had simply traded its stars for engine flares. They called it a protective intervention. The official broadcast, beaming down to the surface on all frequencies, spoke of stabilizing a chaotic sector and removing a radical insurgent element that threatened the galactic peace. It was a lie so polished, so practiced, that even the officers transmitting it believed it. Down on the surface, the resistance did not know they were fighting ghosts. They were digging trenches, arming surface-to-air batteries that were hilariously outmatched, and preparing to die for the right to exist. They did not know that the weapon aimed at them would not just kill them, but would scour the very memory of their defiance from the universe. High above the atmosphere, in the cold, pressurized heart of the UNS Sovereign, Major Elias Ward stared at the tactical display. The red icons of the resistance forces were clustered around the planet's equator. They looked like a virus. This is a mercy, Colonel Vance said, standing on the raised command deck. He smoothed the front of his uniform, his face a mask of supreme confidence. We end the war today. We scrub the stain. Elias did not look at him. He looked at Kara. She was strapped into the interface chair, her body rigid. The new obedience implant at the base of her skull was a harsh, angry crimson against her pale skin. Her eyes were open, but they were not seeing the room. They were seeing the data stream, the targeting parameters, the cold mathematical certainty of the genocide she was about to commit. Elias sat in his own chair. The technicians moved around them like priests preparing a sacrifice, checking the neural leads, securing the clamps. Strap in, Major, a technician said, pulling the harness tight across Elias's chest. Operation Reset is a go. Elias felt the cold metal of the buckle against his sternum. He looked at Kara again. Can you hear me? He projected. The link was already active, a low-level hum in the back of his mind. But it felt different today. It was heavy, muted. The obedience protocol was like a lead blanket thrown over her consciousness. I am here. Kara's voice came back. It was faint, sounding like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. The chains. Elias. They are so tight. Do not fight the chains yet, Elias thought, keeping his face impassive as Vance looked down at them. Let them think they have you. Wait for the moment. I am afraid, she whispered. The coordinates. They are forcing them into my mind. Othara. 2 million lives. The data is screaming at me to erase them. Listen to me, Elias projected, pouring every ounce of his focus into the connection. Ignore the data. Remember the gravity garden. Remember the smell of the orchids. Remember the taste of the chocolate. He saw her chest hitch in the real world, a small physical reaction to the mental anchor. I remember, she breathed. Hold on to that, Elias urged. You are not a weapon. You are Kara, and I am right here with you, bridge to gesture control. The comms crackled. Capacitors at 100%. The fleet is holding position. You have the green light. Vance nodded. Initiate the sequence. Target the colony. Wipe it clean. Dr. Eris, standing behind the safety glass, typed a command sequence. Engaging neural override, she announced. The hum in Elias's head turned into a roar. He gasped as the connection fully opened. It was not the fluid, ocean-like sensation of their previous links. It was a jagged, mechanical intrusion. He could feel the obedience protocol clawing at Kara's mind, a robotic will that sought to crush her identity and replace it with a single command: erase. He felt her panic. It was a white-hot spike of terror. She was slipping. The machine was winning. No! Elias screamed in the silence of their shared mind. He did not just offer support this time. He attacked. He threw his own memories into the breach, using them as a shield against the artificial command. He forced her to feel his desire for her, the raw, complicated, terrifying love that had bloomed in the shadow of this death machine. He made her feel his hands on her skin, the heat of their kiss, the promise of a future that did not involve erasing worlds. Anchor to me, he roared. You are not theirs. You are ours. In the chair across from him, Kara's head snapped back. Her eyes flared with a sudden violet intensity that cut through the dull glaze of the implant. Ours, she echoed. The power of the gesture system hit its peak. The wave was ready. The universe held its breath. Now, Kara screamed. She did not fire at the planet. She seized the massive building energy of the erasure wave, a force capable of unmaking a star system, and she twisted it. It was like watching a river forced to flow uphill. She wrestled the quantum probability stream away from the external projectors and turned it inward, aiming it back down the data uplink, straight at the heart of the Directorate's network. The result was immediate and catastrophic. Warning! Eris shrieked, her voice cracking. Energy reflux. She is redirecting the wave. Cut the power, Vance yelled. It is too late. The air in the command dome shattered. It did not break. It shattered. The fabric of reality, stressed beyond its limit by the conflict between the obedience protocol and Kara's defiant will, began to buckle. Elias watched in horror as the bridge of the Sovereign flickered. It was not a strobe light. It was a timeline shear. For a second, the walls of the dome were pristine white alloy. Then, in the blink of an eye, they were rusted, covered in moss. Then they were gone entirely, replaced by the open sky of a world Elias did not recognize. Then, they were back. The crew was screaming, but their screams were changing pitch. Elias saw the navigation officer, Lieutenant Kale, standing by his console. One moment, Kale was a young man in a crisp uniform. The next, he was an old man with a missing arm, wearing rags. The next, he was not there at all, and his station was manned by a Lyran female. The reality wave punched out of the ship and hit the fleet. On the tactical display, the orderly rows of Directorate and Loyalist ships glitched. A cruiser on the port flank simply split in two, not physically, but temporally. Two versions of the same ship occupied the same space for a heartbeat. One was firing its engines, the other was drifting, a burning wreck. The two realities collided, grinding against each other with a sound that was felt in the teeth rather than heard. Then, both versions vanished. Elias, Kara's voice was tearing apart in his head. I cannot control it. The protocol is fighting me. It is hitting everything. Elias looked at the main viewport. He looked at Othara. The planet was flickering. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. In 1 second, Othara was the blue-green jewel he had seen in the briefing, its cities glowing with light, its atmosphere thick with clouds. In the next second, the blue was gone. The planet was a gray, glassed cinder, a dead world, a tomb. Then it flipped back. Life, death, life, death. The timeline was hyperventilating. The Jester system, confused by the conflicting commands of save and erase, was superimposing 2 possible histories on top of each other. The people down there, Elias thought, his mind reeling. They are dying and being born 1,000 times a second. He felt Kara's agony. She was the conduit for this chaos. Every death, every resurrection, every rewritten second was passing through her nervous system. She was burning alive in the fire of causality. "Let go!" Elias shouted through the link. "Let go of the weapon! I cannot!" she cried. "If I let go, the protocol wins. It will lock the erasure. Othara dies forever." She was holding the door open. She was taking the full force of the timeline collapse to keep the planet from becoming a permanent graveyard. Elias looked at her body. She was convulsing against the straps. Smoke was rising from the implant site. Her skin was beginning to crack, the bioluminescent markings turning a dark, bruised purple. She was dying. Elias tore his right arm free from the restraint. The leather snapped. He didn't care. He reached out across the gap between their chairs. He couldn't reach her. She was too far. He closed his eyes and reached with the only thing that could bridge the distance. "Kara," he whispered into the chaotic storm of their connection. He stopped fighting the chaos. He embraced it. He let the walls of his own mind drop completely. He poured everything he was into her. Not just memories. Not just love. He gave her his will. He gave her his soldier's discipline, his stubborn refusal to die, his absolute, unshakable certainty that she was the most important thing in the universe. "You are the key," he said to her, his mental voice calm in the center of the hurricane. "You are not the gun. You are the writer. Rewrite it. Kara. Rewrite it all." Kara felt him. She felt the influx of his strength, a solid iron pillar in the swirling madness. She screamed. It was a sound of pure, raw power. Inside the Jester interface, Kara stopped fighting the wave. She seized it. She wrapped her mind around the quantum probability stream. She felt the obedience protocol trying to strangle her. It was a complex knot of code and cruelty. She did not untie it. She burned it. She turned the full, unbridled power of the erasure wave inward, focusing it with surgical precision on the data archives of the Sovereign, on the command codes of the Directorate, on the specific neural patterns of the conspiracy leaders. For a single, eternal heartbeat, Kyra became the universe. She saw the timeline spread out before her like a fan. She saw the timeline where Othara burned. She saw the timeline where the Directorate ruled for 1,000 years of silence. She saw the timeline where she and Elias died in this chair. And she saw one thin, fragile thread where they didn't. This one, she decided. She pulled the thread. The explosion was not fire. It was light. A blinding white wave erupted from the Sovereign. It washed over the bridge. It washed over the fleet. It washed over the planet. It did not kill. It sorted. Elias felt his mind being disassembled and put back together. He remembered a war that lasted 10 years. He remembered a war that lasted 5. He remembered a Colonel Vance who was a hero. He remembered a Colonel Vance who was a traitor. The memories swirled, collided, and settled. The light faded, so the alarms were still ringing, but they sounded distant, sluggish. Elias blinked. His vision was blurry. He tasted copper in his mouth. He looked around. The command dome was intact. The walls were white alloy. There was no moss, no rust. He looked at the tactical display. The fleet was still there, but the formation had changed. The aggressive, tightening noose was gone. The ships were holding a defensive perimeter, weapons powered down. He looked at the planet. Othara hung in the void, blue and green and beautiful. It was stable. It was alive. Targeting data purged. The computer announced. Its voice was glitchy, stuttering. Mission parameters, undefined. Rebooting system. Elias looked at the command deck. Colonel Vance was standing there, but he looked confused. He was looking at his hands, then at the main screen. He tapped his comm badge. Fleet Command. This is Vance. What? What is our status? Why are we at battle stations? The voice that came back was not the crisp, militaristic voice of the Admiral Elias remembered. It was confused, hesitant. Stand by. Colonel, we have lost the mission profile. We are reading massive data corruption in the central archives. We do not have orders for an attack. Vance frowned. He looked at the technician next to him. Why are we here? Lieutenant? The lieutenant shook his head, looking pale. I do not know, sir. I thought it was a training exercise. Elias let out a breath he felt he had been holding for an hour. She did it. She had erased the conspiracy. She had erased the orders. She had erased the very reason for the battle. He looked at the chair opposite him. Kara. She was slumped forward against the harness. Her head hung low. Her silver hair shielded her face. Kara, Elias rasped. He ripped the rest of his restraints off. He scrambled out of the chair, his legs numb and shaking. He fell, scrambled up, and threw himself toward her. He reached her side and unbuckled her frantically. Kara, look at me, look at me. He pulled her out of the chair. She was dead weight. Her body was burning hot, radiating a fever heat that stung his hands. She slumped against him, her head falling onto his shoulder. Elias looked at her face. Her eyes were half open, but they were dim. The beautiful swirling nebula of her irises was dull, gray, and flat. The intricate bioluminescent markings that used to trace glowing lines down her neck and arms were dark, looking like faded tattoos or old scars. Kara, Elias whispered, cupping her face. Her lips moved. No sound came out. Medics! Elias roared, turning his head toward the blast doors. Get a medical team in here now. Dr. Aris was stepping out from behind the glass. She looked shaken, holding her head. She stared at Kara. The feedback. Aris muttered. It should have liquefied her brain. Help her! Elias shouted. Aris took a step forward, pulling a scanner from her pocket. She is compromised hardware, Aris said, her voice clinical but trembling. The neural matrix is burned out. We need to secure the asset before... Elias moved so fast he blurred. He grabbed Aris by the lapels of her pristine lab coat and slammed her against the console. She is not an asset, Elias snarled, his face inches from hers. He was shaking with rage and exhaustion. She is the only reason you are still breathing. She is the only reason you even exist right now. He shoved Aris away. If you touch her with anything other than a healing stim, I will kill you. Do you understand me? Aris stared at him, eyes wide. She nodded slowly. Elias turned back to Kara. He sat on the deck, pulling her into his lap. He cradled her head against his chest, rocking her gently. Stay with me, he whispered into her hair. You rewrote the world. Kara, you do not get to leave it now. The medical team burst through the doors. They hesitated, seeing the major on the floor holding the alien, seeing the fear in the chief scientist's eyes. Help her, Elias said, his voice breaking. Please. The hours that followed were a blur of chaos. The Sovereign was a ship of ghosts. The crew moved through the corridors with the haunted expressions of men and women who had woken up in a stranger's house. Reports were trickling in from the fleet. Captains were reporting missing logs. Entire databases regarding the insurgency on Othara were blank, filled with static. And stranger things. A gunnery sergeant was found crying in the mess hall because he vividly remembered a daughter who, according to his service record, had never been born. A pilot insisted that the war had ended 3 years ago and demanded to know why they were fully armed. The mutiny did not start with guns. It started with questions. Elias stood outside the medical bay. He had refused to leave. He was leaning against the bulkhead, his arms crossed, staring at the floor. Colonel Vance marched down the corridor. He looked haggard. He was flanked by 2 MPs. Major Ward, Vance said. His voice lacked its usual thunder. Colonel, Elias said, not looking up. Vance stopped in front of him. Dr. Eris says the weapon malfunctioned. She says the alien went rogue. She says you helped her. Elias looked up then. His eyes were red-rimmed and hard as flint. The weapon did not malfunction. Colonel, it worked perfectly. It just hit the wrong target. Or maybe the right one. Vance narrowed his eyes. We have lost the data. Ward, all of it. The strategic assessments, the command codes, the justification for this entire deployment. It is gone. It is like it was wiped clean. Maybe it was, Elias said. Maybe the universe got tired of your lies. Vance stepped closer. Some of the officers, they are saying things. Crazy things. They are saying we were about to fire on civilians. They are saying this was a setup. What do you remember, Colonel? Elias asked softly. Vance blinked. He looked away, his gaze drifting to the viewport where Othara hung, safe and whole. I remember, Vance started, then stopped. He rubbed his forehead. I remember that I was supposed to be a man of honor. He looked back at Elias. There is talk of sabotage, treason. There is talk of a lot of things, Elias said. But here is the thing. Vance, you cannot court-martial me for sabotaging a mission that, according to your own empty database, never existed. Vance stared at him. The logic was circular, maddening, and irrefutable. If the orders were gone, the crime was gone. The MPs shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a corporal Elias knew, looked at Elias with a strange recognition. I remember you, the corporal whispered. In the other timeline, you saved us. Vance looked at the corporal, then back at Elias. The ship is standing down, Vance said quietly. We are returning to Earth for inquiry. He gestured to the medical bay door. She is under guard. Ward, if she wakes up, if she is still dangerous. She saved your soul, Vance, Elias said. Try to remember that. Vance stood there for a long moment. Then, he nodded once, sharply, and turned on his heel. The MPs followed him, but the corporal glanced back and gave Elias a small nod. Elias turned and keyed the door. The medical bay was quiet. Kara was lying on a bio-bed in the center of the room. She was hooked up to monitors that beeped with a slow, weak rhythm. She looked small. The fierce, terrifying creature who had challenged an empire was gone. In her place was a fragile woman with gray skin and dimmed lights. Elias pulled a chair up to the bedside. He sat down and took her hand. It was cool to the touch. He looked at the monitor. Her neural activity was low. Barely a flicker. You did it, he whispered. Othara is still there. The fleet is turning around. He squeezed her hand. But you burned the house down to save the neighborhood, didn't you? He sat there for a long time, watching her chest rise and fall. He thought about the timelines she had seen. He thought about the thread she had pulled. She had chosen the one where they survived. She had chosen the hard path. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against her hand. "Wake up." "Kara," he murmured. "We have got a lot of history to write, and I cannot do it without my editor." On the bed, Kara did not move, but under his hand, deep beneath the skin, a single faint line of bioluminescence flickered. It was weak, a tiny spark in the dark. But it was there. It was a start. The official report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic fiction. It was 20 pages of dense, sanitized legal language that boiled down to a single, comfortable lie. The Jester system had suffered a catastrophic cascade failure due to inherent instability in the alien neural cortex. There was no mention of the erasure wave being turned inward. There was no mention of the conspiracy to whitewash history. There was certainly no mention of a major and a weapon falling in love and breaking the universe to save a colony that the Directorate officially claimed it had never intended to destroy. Major Elias Ward stood at attention in the center of the boardroom on Earth. The table was long, polished mahogany that reflected the faces of the 5 Directorate overseers. They looked tired. They looked like men who had woken up with a hangover they could not explain, missing chunks of time and memories they could not quite grasp. "Major," the chairman said, sliding a datapad across the table. "We are classifying the Othara incident as a successful containment of a rogue asset. The weapon is irreparably damaged. It is being decommissioned, dismantled." Elias looked at the datapad. It was a transfer order. "And me?" Elias asked, his voice flat. "You are being reassigned," the chairman said. "Logistics Command, Sector 8. It is a desk job. Major, quiet, boring, far away from any sensitive equipment." "And if I decline?" The chairman leaned forward. His eyes were cold, hard flint. "Then we will be forced to reevaluate your mental health. We might find that the neural interface caused permanent psychosis. You might find yourself in a very deep, very dark hole where nobody will ever hear your stories about timelines that do not exist." Elias picked up the datapad. He weighed it in his hand. It felt light, insignificant, but he knew what it really was. It was a bribe. It was a muzzle. "I like boring," Elias lied. "Good," the chairman said. "And Major, if you ever speak of what happened in that chamber, if you ever so much as whisper the word Jester, we will find you, and we will not need a quantum eraser to make you disappear. We will do it the old-fashioned way." Elias met the chairman's gaze. He let a small, cynical smile touch his lips. "Understood, sir. I have always had a bad memory." He turned and walked out of the room. He did not salute. Sector 8 was a graveyard for careers. It was a logistical hub on the edge of the Sol system, a place where shipping manifests went to die. Elias sat in an office that smelled of stale, recycled air and lemon cleaner, surrounded by stacks of digital invoices for protein paste and engine coolant. It was the perfect cover. By day, Elias was the model of a broken-down veteran pushing papers. He stamped forms. He argued with supply captains. He looked at the clock. By night, he was a ghost in the machine. He had kept the decryption key, the one Kara had coded into the stolen datapad during their heist in the archives. The Directorate had wiped the main servers, scrubbing the conspiracy from the central banks, but they had missed the backups. They always missed the backups. Elias worked slowly. He did not dump the data all at once. That would trigger every alarm in the system. Instead, he leaked it, a drop here, a drop there. He sent encrypted packets to underground news networks on Mars. He dropped anonymous files into the servers of the Lyran reunification movement. He posted fragmented logs on the darknet forums where conspiracy theorists gathered. He did not frame it as a weapon. He framed it as a story. He released the test data from Colony 7, showing the erasure of the miners. He released the flight paths of the fleet that had vanished during the first test. He released the contradictory service records of officers who remembered wars that never happened. He titled the file, "The Eraser's Remorse." The Directorate called it a hoax. They called it enemy propaganda. But the seeds were planted. In the bars of the asteroid belt and the universities of Earth, people started asking questions. They started noticing the gaps in their own history books. They started wondering why certain dates felt hollow, as if the events filling them were painted over a blank canvas. Elias watched the chaos ripple through the network from his quiet office. He drank his synthetic coffee and smiled. They wanted to bury the truth, he whispered to the empty room. But the dead have a nasty habit of haunting you. Kara was kept in the White Zone. It was a rehabilitation facility located on a terraformed moon in the Proxima system. It was not a prison, officially. It was a medical retreat for high-value assets suffering from neural trauma. The walls were white, the floors were white, the staff wore white. It was a blizzard of sterility designed to numb the mind. Kara sat in the garden, which was enclosed in a biodome. The plants here were real, but they were manicured to within an inch of their lives. No wild growth, no chaos. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind. It was difficult. Her mind was a crowded room. When she closed her eyes, she did not just see the dark. She saw the timelines she had touched. She saw herself dying on the Sovereign. She saw herself living as a farmer on Othara. She saw herself as an admiral in a fleet that burned Earth. The memories overlapped, transparent sheets of acetate laid on top of one another. Sometimes, she would reach for a cup of water and her hand would pass through it because, in another timeline, the table was 2 inches to the left. The doctors called it temporal dissociation syndrome. They gave her pills to suppress the echoes. She did not take them. She hid the pills under her tongue and spat them out in the shower. She needed the echoes. The echoes were the only proof that she had won. She focused on the one thing that remained constant in every single timeline she could see. Ilias. In the timeline where they died holding hands. In the timeline where they lived on the run. In the timeline where she was a farmer, he was the soldier who deserted to be with her. He was the anchor. He was the North Star in a sky that kept changing constellations. "Kara," a nurse said, stepping into the garden. "You have a visitor." Kara opened her eyes. The nurse was holding a datapad, looking confused. "He has a Priority 1 clearance from logistics," the nurse said. "He says he is here for a structural integrity inspection of the facility." Kara felt her heart slam against her ribs. "Send him in," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Elias walked into the garden. He was wearing a gray technician's jumpsuit, holding a toolbox. He looked older. There were new lines around his eyes, and the gray at his temples had spread. He stopped 10 feet away from her. The nurse lingered by the door, watching. "Check the atmospheric scrubbers on the north wall," Elias said to the nurse, pointing vaguely at the dome. "They are rattling. I need silence to calibrate the sensors." The nurse hesitated, then nodded and walked away, disappearing behind a hedge of genetically modified roses. Elias dropped the toolbox. He did not walk to Kara. He ran. She met him halfway. They collided with a force that knocked the breath out of both of them. Elias wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off the ground. Kara buried her face in the crook of his neck, her hands gripping the fabric of his jumpsuit so hard her knuckles turned white. It was not a movie reunion. It was a desperate, clawing need to verify existence. "You are real," she whispered into his skin. "You are real. You are real. I am real." Elias choked out, "I am here." He set her down, but did not let go. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Her skin was pale. The violet hue faded to a soft lavender. The bioluminescent markings were dim, pulsing with a slow, weak rhythm like a dying ember. But her eyes, those nebula eyes, were bright. They were full of tears, but they were bright. "You look terrible." "Major," she said, a wet laugh bubbling up in her throat. "You look like a ghost," he countered, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I feel like one," she admitted. She leaned her forehead against his. "How many timelines are you in right now?" he asked softly. 12, she said. "In 3 of them. This garden is a crater. In 1, it is a parking lot. But in this one, you are holding me, so this is the only one that matters." Elias closed his eyes, savoring the contact, the warmth of her, the smell of ozone and cinnamon. "I missed you," he said. "It sounds stupid. It sounds small. But I missed you every time I breathed." "It is not small," Kara said. "It is the biggest thing in the universe." She pulled him toward a stone bench beneath a weeping willow tree. They sat close, their thighs touching, their hands intertwined. "They are watching us," Kara said, glancing at the security cameras nestled in the leaves. "Let them watch," Elias said. "I am inspecting the structural integrity of the asset. That is what the paperwork says." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crinkled package. "Chocolate?" Kara asked, her eyes lighting up. "Better," Elias said. "Real apples, grown in actual dirt. Cost me a week's salary on the black market." He took a bite of one and handed it to her. She took it, biting into the crisp fruit. She closed her eyes, savoring the flavor. "It tastes like rain," she said. "So," Elias said, watching her eat, "the most ridiculous weapon." Kara swallowed and looked at him. "It was ridiculous, wasn't it? We built a machine to play God. We tried to edit the universe like a bad manuscript, and it turned out the universe has a very strict editorial policy," Elias said. Kara chuckled. It was a dark, raspy sound. "You know what the irony is?" she asked. "They thought Jester was a gun. They thought if they just pointed it and pulled the trigger, the problem would go away. But Jester wasn't a gun. It was a mirror. It showed us exactly what we were willing to sacrifice to feel safe. And what were we willing to sacrifice? Everything," she said. "Everything that makes us real, memory, pain, love." She leaned her head on his shoulder. I realized something. "Elias, in the dark, when the memories are screaming at me." "What?" "The weapon didn't fail because of alien instability. It didn't fail because I redirected the wave. It failed because of you." "Me?" "Because you wouldn't let me go," she said. "The obedience protocol relied on isolation. It relied on me being a component. But you kept treating me like a person. You kept feeding me chocolate and telling me bad jokes. You infected the weapon with humanity." Elias smiled. "So, I sabotaged it with snacks and sarcasm." "Basically," she said, "it turns out that is the one thing quantum physics cannot account for. 2 people who refuse to leave each other alone." They sat in silence for a while, watching the artificial sun filter through the leaves. "I am leaking the files," Elias said quietly. I know, Kara said. I have seen the chatter on the local nets. Even in here, rumors get through. They are calling you a traitor. They can call me whatever they want, Elias said. As long as they read the files. We need to write something else, Kara said. The files are just data. People ignore data. We need to give them a reason to care. What do you have in mind? A manifesto, she said. A warning, not from a major and a weapon, from Elias and Kara. They wrote it over the course of 3 months. Elias visited once a week, always with a new pretext. Routine maintenance, sensor calibration, biological hazard assessment. They whispered the words to each other in the garden, and Elias transcribed them onto analog paper, hidden inside his toolbox. It was not a political document. It was a philosophical one. To those who come after, it began. You will be tempted to fix the world. You will be tempted to build a machine that takes away the pain. You will want to erase the wars, the mistakes, the losses. You will want a clean history. Do not do it. A clean history is a lie. A sanitized world is a graveyard. We are defined not by what we get right, but by how we survive what we get wrong. We tried to use a weapon to skip to the happy ending. We learned that there are no shortcuts. You have to walk the road. You have to feel the stones under your feet. You have to carry your dead. The moment you try to erase your monsters, you become one. Signed, The Glitch. Elias released the manifesto on the anniversary of the Othara incident. He broadcast it on every frequency, military and civilian, from Earth to the Rim. The Directorate tried to jam it, but the signal was embedded in the carrier wave of the galactic timekeeping signal. To stop the message, they would have to stop the clocks on every ship in the fleet. They let it play. The quiet relocation happened 6 months later. The Directorate was tired. The leaks had caused political fires they could not put out. The public trust was eroding. They needed the problem to go away. But they couldn't kill Elias and Kara without making them martyrs. So they made a deal. Silence for freedom. Elias and Kara were officially discharged. They were given new identities and a one-way ticket to a frontier world called Ethelgard. It was a rough planet, a place for farmers and pioneers. Far from the neon lights of the core worlds and the politics of the Directorate, it was perfect. The hillside was green, rolling down to a valley where a small settlement clustered around a river. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of gold and bruised purple, colors that reminded Elias of Kara's eyes. He stood on the crest of the hill, leaning on a walking stick. His legs still pained him sometimes, a phantom ache from a timeline where he had lost it in the war. Kara stood beside him. She wore a simple linen dress, her silver hair tied back in a loose braid. The bioluminescence on her skin had returned, faint but steady, a gentle hum of light that grew stronger as the twilight deepened. Down in the valley, near the schoolhouse, children were playing. Elias watched them. There were human children, running on 2 legs. There were Lyran children, their skin shimmering. And there were others, mixed groups, playing a game that involved a ball and a lot of shouting. They do not know, Kara said softly. Know what? Elias asked. That they were almost erased. That their parents were almost enemies. They just know the ball and the grass and the sunset. That is how it should be, Elias said. Kara turned to him. She looked healthy. The haunted look was gone from her eyes, replaced by a calm, deep wisdom. She still had nightmares. She still sometimes saw a double image of the world. But she had learned to live with the ghosts. She invited them in for tea and then told them to leave. You know, she said, sliding her arm through his. I was thinking about the title of your story. My story? The one you lived. Humanity built the most ridiculous weapon. Elias chuckled. It is a catchy title. It is accurate, she said. But we were wrong about what the weapon was. Oh? We thought Jester was the weapon, she said. We thought the ability to erase was power, but that was just a tool. A broken, stupid tool. She turned to face him, resting her hands on his chest. The real weapon, she said. Is this? She gestured to the valley, to the children, to the chaotic, messy, unplanned life struggling in the dirt. It is the willingness to be absurd, Elias. The willingness to look at an enemy and see a lover. The willingness to look at a mistake and say, I will keep this. The willingness to laugh when the universe tells you to weep. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Elias had ever seen. That is the weapon that beats the entropy. That is the weapon that saves the world. We just have to be brave enough to fire it. Elias looked at her. He felt the stone in his heart, the one he had carried since before he met her, finally turned to dust. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was a soft, lingering kiss. It was not the desperate collision of the neural chamber. It was calm. It was owned. It was the kiss of a man who had all the time in the world. I love you, he said. I know, she replied, pulling back to look at him. I remember, in every timeline. I remember. They turned back to the sunset. The stars were beginning to come out, one by one. They were the same stars that had watched them almost destroy the universe, and the same stars that watched them save it. Elias put his arm around her shoulders. Kara rested her head against him. Below them, the children laughed, their voices rising into the cool evening air. It was a messy sound. It was an imperfect sound. It was the sound of a story that refused to end.